The Indian government has decided to stop air travel from midnight tonight, a measure that's quite needed as India tries to curb the spread of the virus. But that's not necessarily great news for airlines in the country.
Yep, and it's not just Indian air carriers which face headwinds right now. CAPA, for example, has predicted that half of the world's airlines will be bankrupt by the end of May 2020. Joining us right now to talk about the impact and its fallout, we'll soon be joined by Mr. Kapil Kaul, the CEO of CAPA, and Mark Martin, the founder and CEO at Martin Consulting. He's joining us right now first up. Mark, thanks very much for taking out the time. Obviously, this is not good news for the airline companies, which are any which ways reeling under some amount of stress. Domestic airline and operations to remain shut from tonight at 12 o'clock. This is going to have a cascading effect on financials for some time to come now, because people are not really going to look at traveling, even once this curfew has been lifted, for some time.
Morning. Thanks for having me today, and stay safe, everybody. David, I think that's we're dealing with a pretty rough patch at the moment, and I think whilst effectively the government is taking all precautions and measures to ensure that this virus doesn't spread, I think let me demystify this. We still are not clear and sure of how this virus is going to be terminated away from our markets or from global markets, and I think that's the bigger concern, because it's taken China effectively 6 months. India enters phase 2. So if going by China's track record, we're looking at we're getting over this by at least September, October. So clearly no relief anytime soon. And I think collectively what we need now is more of a cohesive and a comprehensive support package. I'm not going to use the word bailout package. I'll probably say more of a support, because leasing companies are as affected as airlines. And when you have no revenue coming in, you're not going to pay your lease rentals. The government is not going to make VAT, GST on jet fuel, and airports are not going to make any more money. So this is possibly the worst that aviation has ever seen. I've seen the 2008 financial crisis, and that was Shangri-La. So clearly we're entering something which is unprecedented, and collectively everybody needs to come together, including governments, banks, more importantly, because banks are not going to fund anybody at the moment because they themselves are reeling under severe financial stress.
Right, got that point. I also want to bring in Mr. Kapil Kaul, the CEO at CAPA India. Mr. Kaul, obviously these are trying times for the aviation industry as a whole, but in the list of priorities for the government, aviation probably doesn't cut it in the top bracket in terms of any kind of stimulus or any kind of package at this point in time when they're dealing with an economic meltdown of this proportion. Do you feel that then there is very little headwind for all of these airline companies to stay afloat, for that matter, meet obligations on in the debt side, eating into their cash reserves?
Well, I think, first of all, the government has been very, very proactive this time. We have seen, I'm not very sure what will be the outcome, and the outcome will decide what will be the impact on airlines, whether they can manage their at least Q1 challenges. So I think, first of all, the government is seized, they're aware of what is to be done, and there are many suggestions that have been given to the government. So I'm not really sure what will be the outcome, but I'm quite hopeful that the package would be meaningful, because the airlines are directly in touch with them. They understand their cash position. They understand the vulnerability of some of the airlines in the distress they have. So one has to wait and watch, but I'm quite sure that I think the intervention would be meaningful based on the inputs that I have.
Particularly for domestic companies like Indigo and Spice. Obviously, Indigo has said that they do have cash reserves to tide through this period for some time. But if this extends itself, how grave could the damage be?
Well, I think Indigo has about $1.5 billion of free cash, maybe slightly more. So I think they will manage. They have the ability to manage. But obviously, if it goes for 6 months to 1 year, they will be impacted for sure. But I think this period, they have the resilience, they have the cash to manage. But if it goes for maybe 6 months to 9 months, I'm sure everybody would get impacted. Some will close quickly, some will get damaged permanently. But Indigo is right now insulated because of the free cash reserves of about $1.5 billion they have. So they're they're protected. But there would be other airlines who would be extremely vulnerable. They have no cash for more than about a week. And the airline model for most of them works on two pivots. One is advance purchase, which is key to their capitalization. And the second is sale and leaseback revenue. Both have dried up. You have no advance purchase because there has been demand destruction, almost demand destruction. As for sale and leaseback revenues are concerned, that is going to be possibly suspended as and when, because the whole aviation system is closed. So both these revenues are not there for them, and that's key, especially the advance purchase, because every time they needed money, they would do fire sales and sell inventory, forward inventory. But that's almost over now. So it's a very vulnerable period, because if you don't have advance purchase, ability to sell advance inventory, then I think you are more challenged, especially for airlines that don't have any cash at all. So I think it's a very, very serious thing. I think government is aware of it, and I think the intervention would be meaningful.
Yeah, well, the Fed has overnight shown that they've done, something meaningful for the aviation space as well. So let's wait and watch what comes out from India. Mark, just come in. Kapil mentioned that he wouldn't want to second guess what could happen, but the airlines are in touch with the government. Any thoughts on what's an immediate panacea for this space? Because I'm guessing while Indigo may be safer compared to the others, I'm sure the government would be aware of the point that they can't let airlines fail. One jet has gone down. You wouldn't want the others to have serious issues as well.
Well, I think the key part here is to defer. When you're not flying, you're obviously not paying for fuel. And the money you picked up from ticket sales, if you haven't refunded them, you still have them in your account. The whammy that I see at the moment is more linked to how external factors have impacted the business. The rupee is now 76, is going to go to 78. So clearly spare parts and the money that you're going to pay for lease rental is going to be much higher. So clearly you want to start making those payments when the currency is more conducive and we have some sense of a recovery. Now, the critical factor here is to back the industry with a faster rebound. The moment we get out of this, the faster we get those planes up flying, possibly at that stage induct more aircraft, because we are going to have a significant backlog from what we've undergone, which is for the last I'm hoping it's 6 months. So I think a lot of the focus now shifts to how everybody come together and come with some sort of a mechanism that eases the financial constraint on airlines. And apart from having no sale and lease back, I think the more important factor is we don't have revenue coming in for 6 months.
Sure. So Mark, my pointed question is, you would have looked at what the Fed has done overnight, maybe some of the other nations, and what kind of incentives they have given. Within the Indian framework, what do you think is possible?
I think that's a good start, but our dynamics are far different to
Precisely, which is why I'm asking you, that within the Indian landscape, what do you think is possible?
Effectively, very clearly, the DGC and the Ministry of Civil Aviation needs to come up with some sense of a plan that allows for airlines to renegotiate their leasing contracts, lease rentals, defer all their payments, and come to some sort of a restructured or structured payment plan. That's the only solution we have, because the airline business is cash flow based, it's cash flow centered. So we really can't do anything much in terms of playing up on market capital or anything that has got to do with their equity at this stage.
Mark, one final question. What's your view? Interglobe Aviation, arguably better placed financially. SpiceJet, I reckon, is also going to get some receipts from Boeing as compensation income too. What do you think is, or which airline do you think, private or listed or otherwise, is under dire straits right now, if at all?
Given all that we have at the moment, I think any airline that has a higher earnings in foreign exchange with a greater international network is going to see some level of positive income on the P&L side. But with the ban being enforced, we're not sure how they're going to redeploy their fleet or capacity. I'm hoping the ban gets lifted. I hope the government steps in to curtail and suppress the virus. And once that happens, anybody who's flying international, whether it's Indigo, SpiceJet, Go Air, Air India, whoever it is, they will clearly see far higher earnings because the price of oil is much cheaper on the open market globally as opposed to India. But our earnings is going to be in dollars, so that's a positive sign. On the flip side, I see domestic travel being impacted the most. So the average revenue ratio is 60-40. That's domestic versus international. So I think now is a good time to play up on the international part because once we do see the ban get listed up, that's the segment which is going to surge as compared to domestic. So I'd like to be a bit more optimistic. I think I'd probably give my outlook for 30 to 45 day window for recovery, at least for airline stock. But effective, at least for the next 3 quarters, it's going to look pretty rough on airline balance sheets.
Right. Okay. Next 3 quarters. This is really troubling times. Let's see how we come through with this. So Mark, thanks very much for joining in. Mr. Kaul, thanks very much for taking out the time as well.
Thanks.
All right, that was the aviation space, and today's day is not particularly good, and it seems like,
that this airline companies will have some issues going ahead as well. Let's wait and watch how this shapes up. But viewers, thanks for tuning in to this broadcast.